he knew an awful lot about an awful lot, you know, about literature and the arts and all kinds of Buddhism and so on. So I was learning on that level. But what I was really learning, I think, from him was just his example, you know, how he was as a Dharma practitioner, how he was as somebody who'd taken the Bodhisattva vow, how he just really did operate from love, how mindful he was. He was. I've seen a few people who I feel have, you know, gone a reasonable way with the Dharma. I've never seen anybody I thought was so obviously, carefully, conscientiously mindful as Bhante. I think that's a really special quality, and that despite the fact that for a lot of the time when I was being his secretary, he wasn't doing any sort of formal meditation, but he was really in some very deep states. There was one time, not long after I'd, I think maybe even just before I'd become his secretary, where we had winter retreats at Padmaloka, and I was organising. And at a certain point, the shrine room at that point was still in the house. We hadn't got the large shrine room that's there now. And it was due for us to have our late morning meditation. And as we were heading that way, there was the sound of music coming from Bhante's study. He was listening to some Handel. And the retreat leader kind of looked at me and looked upstairs and thought, and said, can you ask him to go and turn the music down? So I thought, I've drawn the short straw as organiser. I have to go and ask my guru, you know, can you turn it down a bit, please? So I went and knocked on the door, and this very, very sort of far away kind of voice said, come in. And I went in, and it was as if he wasn't there. I mean, he was seated in his armchair, and yet the whole feeling was that there's that T.S. Eliot quote about, you are the music while the music lasts. It's like, I really felt that just he was the music. It was almost like he was this very high kind of line of melody that was going on. And I said, excuse me, Bhante, would you mind if I turned the music down a bit? And, he just went, of course. But it was so, I came out of that room in an altered state in the 1 minute that it took me to go and ask him and turn the music down and come out, just because of the state that he was in. And there were other times where he was writing his memoirs and I'd have to go and disturb him about something, and I'd sort of knock on the door, and it almost felt like there was a force field there. I half expected to sort of bounce off it and find myself back outside the door again. I'd almost have to sort of break through this sort of deep kind of bubble of absorption in order to kind of reach him. And some of the time when I was his secretary, he would be writing his memoirs in the mornings, and he'd kind of mindfully navigate down to lunch, but we couldn't really talk at all. It's like most of him was still in Kalimpong in like 1962 or something, and he'd just be there enough almost to kind of eat his lunch, and then he'd sort of be off again. I mean, in terms of our community life, he was a complete party pooper at that point, because we had to wait for him to have finished before we could sort of talk at all, because we really didn't want to sort of break that sort of spell almost. But it did feel like you'd break a spell if you kind of broke in on him. It's like the strength of that depth of absorption was very strong.